Good afternoon. This is the City of Marion work session. This is Tuesday, November 3rd, 2015. It's now 4 p.m. Do we have a presentation, Lon, at this time? I thought we were going to have one.
Go ahead.
So the first thing we're going to talk about today is the 10-year financial analysis. This is one document that the finance department prepares every year. I will say I did a major revamping of it this year, trying to make it more reader-friendly and in an order that made sense. So I'm just going to share some of these slides. Here you can see the fund balances over the last 10 years. The thing that I find most noticeable, the very top green is the overall total of all funds. The next one, the red one, is the capital projects fund, and then the blue is the general fund. I chose the capital projects and general fund because those are our two largest funds. As you can see, our fund balances pretty much align with the capital projects fund. The total aligns with the capital projects, and that's largely due to bonding. I just wanted to show that relationship there. As Lon has stated, usually you see that every other year it goes up and down. This last year, obviously, we bonded twice. So you can see that. On page 8, you can see the property tax revenues over time. Over 10 years, you have seen a 65% increase in the amount of property tax revenues we've taken in. On page 15, you will see the building permit valuations. As you can see, this year we have received a large increase in fiscal year 15. I've kind of noted that was increased largely due to 9 industrial building permits and 1 school remodel. So as part of this, I always do a city comparison where I contact other cities to find out what amounts they've received. One of them is local option sales tax. This I found very, very interesting. The average of the cities that do receive local option sales tax, I believe I calculated it in the average population of these cities, excluding Marion, is approximately 33,000 in population. However, the average received is $139.06 per capita. Marion, as you can see, is only at 126.79, and that is based on the current census population. And then the last slide I actually wanted to show is the last one. Here I was trying to show outstanding GO bond debt per capita comparing to other cities. And as you can see, the average is $1,476.89. As we all know, Marion right now is sitting at $1,625.06, which is above the average. However, when you look at the debt service levy, the average is actually $2.64, and Marion is sitting below that at $2.29. Now, you might be asking yourself, how can we have more debt but be paying less in our debt service levy. One thing to keep in mind is a lot of our debt we actually repay through TIF. So we bond for TIF projects, we request that money back, and we're actually paying that debt back with TIF. And other cities will tell you they pay for their debt with other revenue sources, such as utility funds. That's a huge one. Are there any questions regarding the 10-year analysis? I just kind of wanted to show you some of the highlights.
If I could, Leanne, one thing I wanted to draw to the council's attention is if you take a look at page 4, you can see the graph of revenues versus expenditures. And one thing you'll notice is that those lines kind of cross back and forth quite a bit. And that is driven by Marion's cyclical bonding, where typically you bond every other year for a project. So you'll have a year where, due to receiving the bond proceeds, that the revenues look really high related to expenditures. And then the next year, when you go out and do those capital projects, especially if you're doing very large road projects in a particular year, you'll draw that balance down. So when she was showing you the graph earlier that showed the capital projects fund balance, you'll see that it does this as well. That's because you receipt the money in one fiscal year and then typically expend only part of it that year and then the bulk of it the next fiscal year. So that's why those two lines go back and forth.
Any comments?
Oh, good information. Thank you.
So the next thing that the Finance Department has on the agenda is to approve an amended overdue account and insufficient funds policy. This is coming out of our ERP software project. What we are basically wanting to do is take our current policy, which states that when you are 30 days past due, we'll charge you a minimum of $3 or 1.5%. We're wanting to change, and then the next 30 days you're past due, it would be $5 and then 1.5%. Within our new software, you can't do both, like two different flat fees. So we're recommending changing that to just the flat $5 and then the 1.5%, and then updating the non-sufficient funds from $10 to $25. So basically, when someone writes a bad check, we charge them $25 instead of $10. We did still leave in the language so that if something comes up, for instance, a common one that I get, I accidentally wrote the check out of a wrong account, we do still have the ability for department heads to waive that fee in those instances. This is one policy out of many that you will see updated with this project. Do you have any questions?
Why the difference as far as total amount?
As far as what? I'm sorry.
Well, going to $25 overdraft when most places just ask for 10, and the $3 the first year, $5.
$3 the first 30 days, and then $5
yeah.
the next 30 days. Our new software will only allow you to do $5, 1.5%. There's no like steps. You either choose steps or percentages. So you can do a flat minimum. So your minimum's $5, or it's 1.5% of the total past due.
You can't do a flat fee of $3.
You can't do 3 and then 5. Our current policy does 3.
No 5, just the 3.
So our current policy is if you're 30 days past due, we charge you $3.
Okay.
And then if you don't pay within those 30 days, we then would charge you $5.
Well, that's what I'm objecting to. I mean, you're going to put somebody in the hole, and you're going to keep going in the hole, and you're not going to get anything.
Mary Lou, one thing we noticed too, that the last time we've updated this policy, I think, was 2003, so it's about 12, 13 years overdue for a revision. The other thing, we just went out for our banking services RFP, and in that process, I don't think anybody charges less than probably $25 for an overdraft charge. We're just trying to pass costs on that we get charged.
Well, the thing that bothers me is basically we're a service organization. We are not a for-profit company where you would be charging interest to make up whatever. I don't know.
Well,
I think it's exorbitant.
one thing to keep in mind is every time we send out a bill, you are spending 49 cents for that mailing, in addition to the paper that's printed, the envelope, the actual paper, and the time spent doing that. So $3 minus 49 cents minus the envelope 10 cents minus the paper, plus the time that's taken to do this. So you're not really charging that much with $3.
Well, like I said, this is a service organization, not a for-profit, and there's an awful lot of people out there who are scraping, and it just doesn't seem fair to me.
And then as for the non-sufficient funds, I can tell you with my being in finance, they're very hard to collect. You can call multiple times, as we usually do. A lot of organizations probably don't even call. We will call, let them know. We give them the opportunity to pay it. Like I said, department heads do have the availability to waive the fee, which we have done in the past. We've waived the $10 fee multiple times.
Well, I know that after a certain amount of time, it gets turned over to a collection agency, and then that is such a small percentage that you collect on that, it just doesn't seem worth it.
And it is a council decision as to what you guys set those dollars amounts at. If you want it at $3 and then 1.5%, you can do that. If you want it at $10 instead of $25, you can do that. This is just what we're recommending based on what we've done. So.
Okay, well, that's just my opinion.
We're not charging as much as the bank charges them,
Well, and
you know.
But they're still for profit.
what I think I heard you say is that the bank is charging us the $25, right?
No.
No?
Well,
No, he
it-
did not say that.
Oh.
And one
Oh,
other
I'm
thing I
sorry.
should say is your non-sufficient funds checks are usually on things like recreation or on photos. So for the most part, when we get those NSF checks, the majority of the time we actually end up writing it off. In other words, that person got their photos for free or their recreation for free.
No, what I was referring to is when we were doing our banking services interviews, almost every bank was charging, well, at least 25 or more. Now, they do and they don't charge us like at Farmer State Bank because it's built into the interest factor that they pay us on our account. So we don't actually see that maybe $25 charge coming through, but it is
I thought I heard you
factored
say
in.
there was that fee that we're passing along, the fee that we were being charged, but that's not correct. Okay.
We aren't charged, correct. But
Okay.
like I said, where I run into most NSFs are not your building permits. They're not the things that you can actually put
I'm
against their
not
property.
a bank. This is my whole objection. And well,
I would agree that the city is not a bank, but we run everything from the standpoint of being a nonprofit, which means that if we incur costs for collections or for providing a service to an individual who, for example, we get a non-sufficient fund check on and we have to put additional staff time and additional legal time into collecting that, we also don't have the profit margin to fall back on to write that bill off the way that for-profit entities like banks do as well. The main philosophy and the reason most communities will have a policy like this is so that the person who is causing the extra work is paying for it, and that everybody else who does pay their bills on time is not subsidizing the costs of collections against that individual.
I just don't think it's right, that's all.
So if you want to amend the amounts, you can amend the amounts.
We'll take care of that.
We don't really.
I got a question.
Okay, go ahead, John.
I got a question back on your charts.
Okay.
On page 6, you talk about the revenue. Why you're showing for 2016 the revenues dropped, but if you look at page 8, the property tax revenues, that's holding steady. What's causing that to?
Okay, you're looking at
projection?
2016, correct?
Yes.
That's based on what we have budgeted. So a lot of it may be because we did not budget a large bond issue.
It's what?
Because we did not budget a large bond issue.
Oh.
You see the one that says debt service and capital projects? It's that next line that looks very similar to the overall.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
It would
okay.
be because we did not budget a large bond issue.
Oh.
Another thing, Joe, is we try and estimate revenues for the coming year on a conservative basis. We don't want to overestimate those and then not be able to meet that goal.
The other thing that I would point out too is that FY 2015 was overinflated because we did the refinance of the TIF issuance to help out the school districts, and so we had a lot of debt that had been on development agreements, so it was on private books that we took on because of the interest rate reductions and because we could actually reduce the amount of TIF increment that we were asking for, but that inflated our revenues for that particular year. Plus, we had an existing bond issue that we refinanced because we'd reached the point where it was callable and we could save some money by refinancing it at a lower interest rate, and that also inflated revenues.
So if we hadn't done that line would have been fairly flat at the top then?
It'd be the 66 million, you'd take 18 million off of that.
Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Say at this time I want to take a break out of the agenda. I have Mr. Anderson in the back. You can step forward. He wanted to make a comment here before we even started, and so I kind of lost out on this and lost track. But he has a comment. State your name and address, sir, and thank you.
No problem. Jim Anderson. I live at 3600 35th Street Court. I also own Anderson Automotive at 4850 Chandler Court. And I kind of want to bring to light an issue I'm facing as a business owner. As you know or don't know, I own an automotive service company, and I'm having trouble finding a location or any place to expand my business. I built the building I'm in now 13 years ago. We've increased the revenue we generate in the community by 388%. I've added 5 jobs from 2 to 5, and we're just bursting at the seams. So I had an opportunity a few months back I had somebody potentially interested in my property, so I was looking at what I could do, and I went and talked to the bank. All right, everything's okay, I can do whatever I need to do. So I started looking at land. I worked with the planning and zoning people, and they directed me towards landowners that had commercial property in that side of town because I don't want to move too far from where I'm at. And I keep getting told the same thing. We don't want your kind of business in our development. It seems that I'm getting pigeonholed as, Goober from Mayberry or something. And I've been told, and in fact, it's kind of ironic, Miss Crable's here from the fire department. She used to always do the inspections. And she'll back me up. She told me several times, I wish every automotive shop kept it as nice as you did and followed the rules like you did. Because we were never a problem for her. We don't have issues. We don't have junk cars laying around. We don't have that kind of stuff. And so I was referred to the industrial park that out east of the new police department. And I contacted Medco and talked to them. And they don't want my kind of business in their park. So I'm very frustrated as a business owner because I've done nothing but start a business, grow it, have it flourish, added jobs, increased revenue, and when it comes time to expand as an independent business owner, nobody wants my kind of business. And that's just something I wanted the council to be aware of, because you force businesses that are like my kind of business to leave Marion. And I don't want to. I've done nothing. Our shop, to let you know how different it is we're one of only two facilities in the entire metro area, including Cedar Rapids, that meets AAA standard to be a recommended repair facility for AAA clients. And you should see the standards you got to pass. You have to pass an on-site inspection of your facilities, your technician's ability, your equipment, your warranty, your policies. They actually randomly take your entire customer database and randomly call 200 people, and you have to satisfy 95% or higher satisfaction rating, and so on and so on. And you have to pass that standard every year. My shop is the only shop in the entire state of Iowa to ever be honored with the Better Business Bureau's Integrity Award. The Integrity Award is consumer-driven. You have to be nominated by the general public. I'm the only shop in the history of the state of Iowa to earn this honor, yet nobody wants my kind of business. And I find that very frustrating. When I contacted Medco, I was told by Mr. Nick Glue that, he asked me what I was looking for. I said, originally I was looking for 1 to 2 acres, but I'll consider more. We don't have anything that small. I said, no, it's a problem. No problem. I'll consider more. Well, but this many acres is going to be this much money. And Cedar Wing, I can't afford it. I honestly took that as quite an insult. So every objection that he raised, I said, okay. Well, yeah, but then it's this. I don't have an issue with that. Well, but then it's this. I don't have an issue with that. Until he finally said, it's just not going to work. So I want to ask the city council, why do we have an industrial park that doesn't want industry? I mean, I only need C4 zoning, and I can't get a lot in an industrial park? Why is that? The list of what they want for businesses, I don't fit. It's amazing. I encourage you to read they have a whole document, and it's the list of accepted businesses. Warehouses, call centers, labs, doctor's offices, dentist offices, restaurants, or large warehouses. Nothing where a retail commercial business is allowed. And I wondered why that was. And that's what I wanted to share with the city, is because this is an issue. And I would encourage, there's an open invitation to anybody on the council or in the city that wants to come visit my facility. Please call first. I travel a lot for the industry as well, but you're welcome to come down. I'll show you how we do it differently. But nobody in Marion wants my kind of business. And that's a challenge. I get told by Medco, well, we really just can't sell you a lot because we were told that we can't compete with the commercial property owners in town that have lots. Okay. Then I got from the planning and zoning a list of many property owners. He spent 2 hours with me in his office going over all the available commercial lots on that side of Marion, and I got all names of all the property owners. Talked to all of them personally. Nobody wants my kind of business. So they won't sell to me. Medco won't sell to me. Now I've been approached again within the last 24 hours. Somebody wants to buy my property. So if I sell my property, what have I left? I'm left with leaving Marion. Why is that?
I think that I would like to hear from Medco as to why they have turned you down after you've complied with everything that they've asked for.
Well, the last thing it was left with is Mr. Glue sent me a letter of suggested other properties, all of which I'd already spoken to. And if I was willing to use their architectural designer and spend all this money to put together a building that looked like they wanted it to look like, if you read the document of their vision, it lists certain types of constructions that aren't allowed and all that is geared to eliminate anything like what we do.
It's an industrial park.
That was what I thought.
That's what I thought.
I ran into the same thing when I built the building I'm in now. I talked to Mr. Jim Lamb, who owns a lot of the property that's just west of the police department, that whole industrial park. And I got told the same thing. I don't fit in their industrial park. And I got very fortunate with the lot that I got now. The owner actually approached me, and I called and inquired about it, and it was out of my price range. And he came and approached me later and said, look, it's the last lot I got. I'm willing to be negotiable. And he made it just enough affordable for me to build and start off.
Would you add personnel?
Well, eventually, yeah. I can't now.
Yeah, right.
I'm out of room. I'm currently using the entire parking lot, which is to the city's standard sizes. And at times, we got 7 to 14 cars parked along the street. Thank God we're a cul-de-sac. And everything's legal. I mean, we're doing everything legally. It's just I'm out of room. And I can't expand my business in Marion. And I'm approved at the bank. It's not like I'm just, wishing and hoping.
Then you wouldn't be overdrawn and getting your $3 plus a percentage and a half.
Actually, my fee's much higher at the bank because, trust me, I do forget to transfer money from account to account several times.
Okay.
In fact, I joke with the bank, I think I financed their Christmas party with fees, but that's beside the point. That's just because I'm forgetful at times. But the larger issue is that, the visions I have for my shop going forward, I even shared with Mr. Glue, and it just didn't seem to fit, what they wanted. I'd like to, the visions I have, to answer your question, the visions I have is to expand it to a point where no car sits outside. Customers pull into a heated area and drop their car off, and they don't even have to get wet. Something you only see at large dealerships. I'd like to have it to where all cars are stored inside. Now, can that be that way from the get-go? No, it can't. I mean, I got to build a new facility. I can't afford to do it right away.
Yeah.
And Mr. Glue was demanding that kind of stuff had to be in place right away. Well, then I'm faced with the same situation that would happen right now. If a tornado came through and wiped out my building right now, with the new standards you have with the 7th Avenue beautification, my building's illegal. It's 12 years old. It doesn't fit. I'm 180 feet off the center line of Business 151, yet I'd have to have a monument sign. What good is a monument sign going to do me 180 feet off the center line of the road? I wasn't even allowed to make my sign better because I haven't mounted the side of my building when I needed to replace it a few years ago because it was fading and I wanted it to look good. I wasn't allowed to put a little bit bigger one or anything because it wasn't a monument sign or backlit. To build my building now, if I were to lose it in a storm, would be in excess of $1 million. To build it to the standards that the city has now for where I'm at. And I had less than $252,000 in it when I built it 13 years ago, including the price of the land. And yet, we're faced with these situations. And on top of that, just as another fact, my property taxes have gone up in excess of 300% in 12 years. 300% as a small business owner in Marion.
So everybody's familiar.
So-
Where's your shop now?
It's right down where Dollar General is and Aldi's. And Culligan's my neighbor. The power plant's next door to me. Dollar General's to the west of me, or east of me, excuse me. Substation's to my west. Culligan's across the cul-de-sac. Yeah. Straight across the highway is Hawkeye Auto. If I look out my front door across Culligan's parking lot, I can see Hawkeye Auto.
And
I'm not associated. I'm just telling you, it's a landmark. Everybody knows the big, bright yellow building. So.
You get a lot of customers. How many acres are you looking for? How many acres do you need?
I need a minimum of 1, but that doesn't allow for some of the bigger expansions I want to do with enclosed storage. 2, it'd be a minimum for future expansion, but I'd buy more if the price was, right. I mean, obviously, I can't afford to, as a small business owner, I can't afford to go and drop, $600,000 just on the land. But I have a project budgeted. I've already talked to a builder. I mean, I know what it's going to take to build the facility I want, but nobody wants to. I'm finding a lot of difficulty, and it was really, quite honestly, it was just disappointing to me that nobody wants my kind of business in Marion. And the biggest thing that was more frustrating was an industrial park that won't even allow a C4 business in. I was told I had to use their designers and everything like that. I had to have plans to develop the entire property right away. I couldn't just develop part of it now for what I want and then expand my business as it grew and demand grew. How am I supposed to predict that? How am I supposed to be able to afford that? How am I supposed to put jobs and square footage in right away with no sales and customer base to back it up? That's suicide. To let you know a little bit about myself is I also work with a consulting company out of Los Angeles. I actually work for them for the automotive repair industry, just for independent repair. I'm one of 4 people certified in the United States to do on-site inspections to help shops like mine do it right, do it better, and do it profitably. I'm one of less than 50 that has been honored with, it's called the Masters of Shop Management Award.
Well, you're
and
a
I
local
actually
business.
teach classes for our industry on a nationwide scale.
You're a local business, and
Yes.
you're proven, and I don't see what the problem is.
Well, I just wanted to bring it to the council's attention that this is a situation that I find myself stuck in, and it's kind of, it's actually just disappointing is what it is.
True.
So it's not like I'm some kid working on cars out of a garage, I've dedicated my life to this. And I just wanted to share with you what's going on.
Thank you.
Because I'm soon going to be faced with, if this situation with the person that approached me last night goes through, next spring or summer, I'm going to have to build a new building. I want it to be in Marion, but right now, I can't even buy a piece of ground to put it on. So,
Well, thank you. Thank you.
welcome. Thank you for giving me the time to speak.
Yes, sir.
What's your phone?
Have a good day.
Can we give out your phone number so we could give you a call if?
The shop's number is real easy, 447-4444.
Oh.
You can speak to Curtis, who's my manager, or my wife's name is Terry. She's the office manager. Like I said, I'm out of town literally 50% of the time working for the industry, so.
All right, thank you.
All right, and that's why I needed to come today, because I'm leaving Thursday. I wasn't going to be here for a regular council meeting, so thank you for allowing me to speak today.
Thank you, sir.
Have a good day.
Mr. Glue is in the audience. Could we have him comment on this?
No, I'll tell you what, we'll get a better presentation at a later date. That'd be fine. Can we continue now with our agenda?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. I submitted a council packet for review of our self-contained breathing apparatus, and I don't know if anybody had any questions regarding the packet in particular.
Nope.
Okay. I'll give you a little background about our department and how that we determined a few years back in the asset replacement schedule to make this one big purchase of SCBA's, fill stations, compressors, and such, because we had such a scattered, due to the addition of Station 2 and other apparatus that we need to outfit with other breathing apparatus. We had different dates on apparatus, which created kind of a maintenance and annual servicing nightmare for us. So a few years back it was determined that when we do replace these, we're going to replace them all at once, and we have our cylinders, a majority, almost all of our cylinders are going to be expiring in March. So this had been an asset replacement, then had been moved to the lost funding. In the packet, long story short, the bids that we have, I'm looking for council approval to piggyback a previous bid by Knoxville, Iowa this year that had essentially bid out 3 of the vendors that we called in to our committee to overview their packs. We felt that the one that this bid had gone out to previously fit what we were looking for. It's the type of apparatus that we currently use, so it'd be less training for our personnel also, and the cost effectiveness of that was another factor. So.
So these all have a lifespan?
Yeah.
We have to buy new ones?
10 to 15-year lifespan, yes. Yeah.
There's no portion of that apparatus that can be saved and reused somewhere else for somebody, anyone else?
No, they all meet an NFPA standard, right. And each mask goes with each pack. And sometimes the bottles are interchangeable. You can interchange bottles, but as I said, all of our cylinders are going to be expiring in March, and essentially the packs and masks all get paired together. You can interchange, like if I have 2 similar packs, I can use this mask on this pack and this mask on this pack, but as far as different years and dates and styles, essentially the pack comes in one full compatible unit.
Right. Right.
So on your request, you talk about having, $260,000 for the loss funding. That won't cover what you're looking at, right? So are you saying you need a budget increase to cover this?
Correct, Joe. I'll kind of explain that breakdown a little bit. The lost funding, the current lost funding for that is $260,000. The Marion Township employees are responsible for and are paying for 11 SCBA's face pieces, filter adapter assemblies, accountability tags, and 22 bottles, which their total would be just over $69,000. That would bring that total to just over $329,000. So the SCBA's and such would be able to be purchased on this bid. The items that have not been included that we're trying to get as a full in total purchase would be the items listed as far as 1, 2, and 3. The air compressor with a 6,000 PSI capacity, an in-house fill station that we're replacing for the SCBA cylinders. And I wanted to note that by utilizing the current bid items, we've been able to eliminate the purchase of a fill station on our rescue unit. That was initially supposed to be replaced also in our rescue truck where we fill bottles on fire scenes, but with this current option we do not have to replace that, so we're saving monies there. and then 10 DOT spec bottles. Those 10 bottles are essentially at the station. We have the compressor that fills these spare bottles that are standing there. They're large DOT spec bottles. And then when we have a large fire, we bring the bottles in. We can fill all of our bottles on a cascade system.
But I guess I'm asking, are you asking for more money to cover
Not
this?
at this time. Not at this time, because the funding between the lost funding and the township share is going to cover this bid.
Okay.
Essentially, what we're looking at, then, we have an estimated price for the compressor and fill stations and things that we'd have to bid. We'd want to go out and bid and purchase after this SCBA purchase, where we will need an additional, approximately right now it's looking like over $7,000, but I believe there's options for additional monies, whether it's through, in addition through lost, or checking with the township trustees again, or this was originally an asset replacement item, and there may be funding that we can pull off of that to make up this purchase. But currently, the SCBA purchase that I've presented is covered with current funds.
Okay. So our steaks aren't going to cost $20 next year, are they?
No, $15.50 maybe. No.
Okay. Just checking.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Thank you. Anything else?
No, I don't have anything else.
Great.
Nobody else does.
Thank you very much. Parks?
Item number 1 on the agenda under Parks is setting a public hearing for utility easement for Iowa Power and Light. And it's an overhang easement, what they call it.
Is that Interstate Power instead of Iowa Power?
That,
Mine says Interstate Power.
did I say Iowa? Interstate Power and
Okay.
Light, IPL. It's an overhang easement, and it'll go on poles that we provided an easement in this area. City property is here. This line goes across over towards Armar Plaza. ITC is upgrading their transmission line through this area. This is kind of the Creek Bend Court area over here. Our trail that is existing runs through here and then up through this way. The easement that we're providing is that they will hang their power lines on the existing poles that ITC is going to install. They haven't installed the upgraded lines yet, but that's why the power company is asking also for an easement in that area to hang their lines on it also. So basically, we're setting the public hearing for that request. Let me give you maybe this will kind of give you a better idea on this one. This is the area that we're talking about right here where the easement is. And then here's the existing trail coming up through along. You're going towards the south over towards Menards, and then this is the Creek Bend Court area. So it's a pretty small easement area overall.
How close to the ground will those lines be?
You know, Joe, they haven't told me exactly what the height is that they'll be hanging on, but I imagine that they'll be fairly high. They're upgrading the transmission poles, and they're going up in height. So I got to imagine that the Alliant lines are IPL lines. They'll be fairly high too, but they didn't exactly tell in the request what that height is.
So are these like a residential distribution line?
They'd be the distribution lines is what we're talking about.
So it's like 10 kV.
Yeah.
So on the 19th, November 19th, we'll have a hearing.
Yep.
Okay, great.
And I had several other items on the agenda, and I didn't highlight any of them, but if anybody had any questions, I could answer.
Thank you.
We'll start, Your Honor, with item number 4 under the engineering agenda. It has to do with the Armar Drive Extension Project. Some of you should be aware of that. We've been pursuing, trying to get right away from the purchase from the owners At this location, this is Highway 100. Damon Street goes south, Armar's up here, the mall's over, Indian Mall's over here. Currently, we're trying to build, we redid this intersection, signalized it, trying to build this section of Armar to relieve traffic problems at the north side. We will be purchasing right-of-way, this here, and the two construction easements on both sides. What we did have was, as part of, as directed by council, looking at a potential condemnation of this property to provide for the building of the street within the right-of-way that would need to be condemned. We've had several contacts with the owners with very little response, so we have pursued that. With the appraisal that was done for the moving forward with the condemnation, the total for the right-of-way and the temporary easements, $86,500, which would be our cost. That would go through the condemnation hearing and so forth. If the property owners do not agree to sell at some agreed-upon amount prior to that time.
Are they corresponding with us at all? They weren't for a while.
Very little. Lon's been doing a lot of the contacting. I did some of the early stuff, and then we moved on to try. We've had several developers contact them, try to make it happen that way. We've proposed several different scenarios where we would provide for benefit for the development of their property and so forth, and they're just not willing to do that. So we are proposing at this point to move ahead with setting, basically what this would do is set the fair market value based on the appraisal, and then that would move forward to some kind of negotiation and then eventually to a condemnation hearing.
Now, can eminent domain take over on this?
Well, that's what basically condemnation is.
Well, but I mean, usually it's much less than.
Current law requires us to have an appraisal done. It also provides for them to have an independent appraisal done as well. And with those would be presented to the condemnation hearing committee if we cannot come up with an approved value prior to that.
Well, under condemnation, the difference between that and eminent domain is eminent domain would be the street that would go through, which would benefit traffic and all that. It's not necessarily what the Roushes would want.
The way it works is after the council certifies that this is a fair market value, then our attorney has to provide the offer plus a copy of our appraisal. They have a minimum of a 10-day response period to get back to us and commence negotiations. If they are actively negotiating back and forth, then we have a period where we have to work with them to see if we can come to a voluntary agreement. If you reach an impasse and you can't reach a voluntary agreement, then the next step for us is to go to the county and get everything set up to proceed to a condemnation hearing. Then the condemnation board hears the arguments from both sides, sets what they feel is just compensation, and then the city would proceed with the acquisition of the property.
Is there ever a scenario where that committee would say no to the sale?
Not if there's a public purpose that's being served by this. And, we've been looking at this project from a couple of different lenses. One is to provide a better connection for emergency services, plus to provide an alternate route to serve those businesses when Collins Road gets torn up and they start to do the underpass on Lindale. We would expect to see a lot of traffic using Tama and Armar as kind of a cut-through to avoid having to go up to the congestion at the First Avenue and Collins Road intersection.
The committee could set an independent amount. It wouldn't necessarily be the $86,500. We did a condemnation hearing with 29th Avenue Extension back in 09, 08, and we had a value, and the property owners had a value, and they set a value somewhere in between that we all agreed upon.
What would be the maximum timeline in your mind?
Depends on if they get back to us within the 10 days. If they get back to us within 10 days, I believe there's a 30-day negotiating window. From there, it really depends on when the sheriff can serve the notice of the condemnation hearing. Our attorney that we've been using said that that's kind of the wild card in Lynn County, is never knowing how busy the sheriff is to get those notices served. Once you have that, then you go to the condemnation board, typically between 15 and 30 days after the serving of that notice. So our goal with this always has really been to be able to make sure that we could be looking at construction for next year.
Good. Anything
Any
else?
other questions on that?
So would they, could they possibly have their own fair market value evaluation done to match what we have done then?
Typically, that's what they'll do, especially if you go in front of the condemnation board. They're not required to be as scientific as a full appraisal. They can have kind of a market analysis done by a realtor or present other data of their own if they think that our numbers through the appraisal are not what they should be. The only other thing I would mention is that even after the condemnation board meets, you still have the potential to negotiate a different resolution than what the condemnation board has recommended. Like in the case of 29th Avenue, a price was set for the full amount of acreage that we were acquiring. What we ended up doing with the property owner was working things out to pay that price for, I believe, 10 acres adjacent to 29th Avenue, and then they were able to donate the remainder of the property to the city, which gave them some tax advantages while not making us pay any more for the total site that we received.
So the funding source for all this activity, where is this?
This one was actually included in the 2009 bond, so we've had those dollars sitting in there in anticipation of this project being able to move forward. As Dan said, we've tried at least 4 times since I've been here to try to get a deal put together with it. The upshot of it is that our subdivision ordinance requires that the property owner is responsible for putting in the street and paying for 14 feet and 7 inches of paving. They do not and have never wanted to pay for that.
Yet they tore down the house and
we required that because it was a continuing nuisance problem, and it was more cost effective for them to tear it down than it was to seal it up to the point where it complied with our nuisance code.
Did they use it as a burn?
I think it was just removed.
Oh.
like one day I drove by one morning and it was, that afternoon it was gone.
Well, you should have burned it, used it as an exercise.
I think that's a really key street, I think, that Armar connection is.
Correct. It looks like we have a good timeline. That's fine. Next.
Okay. Item number 5 is the 2016 Lindale Trail crossing at Lindale. Trail crossing at Lindale Drive project. Basically what we're looking at, we have built this trail that goes across Lindale just south of 8th Avenue, and we're looking at upgrading the signage there to some pedestrian beacons. That project is ready to be let. We're looking at a sealed bid letting on the 24th of November. This would have a spring of April of 16 start date with 10 working days and liquidated damages. I think the memo you've seen, I put an estimated cost of around $50,000. We've got that down to around $36,000 now. So that will be the estimate. We'll have that letting and bring that back to you for approval.
Yeah, that's the old railroad right away, right?
It is, yes.
Is this something, Dan, they push to make the lights come on, or what?
Yeah, it has a pedestrian button on a bollard that you can push that makes both sides flash, and then the traffic would stop as you cross over.
Yeah, so it's not a proximity type thing where it sees them running by and then it...
No.
It's not like the train where you...
Yeah, so there would be no interruptions of traffic unless somebody is there to push the button.
Yeah, okay.
Next item has to do with item 6, which is the Grantwood Trail from 35th Street to Highway 13. This project has been moving forward with a contract with Anderson Bogart to do design. In the process, though, we have come up with an area that has apparently a lot of wetlands. So we're looking at extending the contract by $9,000 to allow for the wetland determination so that we can decide how we are going to mitigate or work around those wetlands. That $9,000 would be an extra work order within the contract. Questions on that? Next item is number 7, which is the 29th Avenue widening project. It has been completed. We did have an overall, I think I want to see that.
That is nice.
Thank you. we would like to finish it all. We do have, I think within your packets, there was this spreadsheet having to do with the overall project costs. We did have agreements with the adjacent owners prior to the contract being let through the developer and before construction started. We did have a completed total project cost of $450,920.16. With that, we would like to hold a public hearing on November 19th to set those access fees that would be paid for by the adjacent owners that are currently developing the property, Prestwick and Robson Homes. Those amounts have been set per the MOAs at $89,432.70 for Prestwick, or $139.92 per lineal foot of frontage, which will happen at the time that they plat the adjacent property. For Robson Homes, it's $228,081.84, which has a lineal foot cost of $131.37. The remainder of the cost of the project is the city's cost. That's the over width, over depth that we did as part of 29th Avenue and bring it out to the width that we needed to put on the bike trails and the lanes. So this will take 3 readings. It is an ordinance, so after the public hearing, we'll have 3 readings. Questions?
When is that going to be? Oh, the 19th, okay.
Okay. Number 8 and 9, Mike is going to come up and talk about SUDAS. He's going to try to put you to sleep here. I would also like to talk a little bit quickly before he gets up here on number 10. We do have a motion based on this correspondence for a request for no parking on First Avenue from 29th Avenue to 33rd Avenue. By referring this to TAC, TAC will notify all the residential properties in that area. We'll go through the whole process. I guess I bring it up as the council has been denying very similar requests for this, the no parking in these residential streets. If that is what you feel may happen in the future, I guess it may be better off for staff to not refer it to TAC, but to take it as a request that does not need action and possibly move forward in that direction. We will have it on the agenda as referred to TAC, so if you do not amend the motion, it will go to TAC. We'll go through the process. We'll have a public hearing the whole bit. So,
good.
Questions on that?
Thank you.
All right, so what we're proposing to do here is, I won't go through the entire manual, but these are basically the 2 manuals that we're looking at adopting here. I won't sit here and read this to you, but that's what we're talking about here.
Don't give it to Tom.
You thought the compliment. Yep. All right, so first off, what's our current standard? Our current standard is the Cedar Rapids Metro Area Standards and Specifications for Public Improvements. Those are the blue books on this share, so you can see it's relatively thinner. So we basically have a standard specification, we have a design manual, and we have details. So we're going from that pile to this pile. So a little more information there. Currently, the Cedar Rapids standards that we're using, Cedar Rapids is just deciding to change things in the specifications without letting us know or letting us have any input on these changes. So it makes it kind of hard to keep up with the specifications when they just say, just check the website, it's on there. And so you got to read through that entire spec to see what they changed. So we recently had a SUDAS meeting where Cedar Rapids was there, and we had some discussion about certain items, and it was brought up, well, that was changed in 2014. Well, thanks for letting us know. So because they're not allowing us to have input or know of those changes, it makes it hard to do projects. And then they will also be transitioning to SUDAS as well, but they're a couple of years behind us. So what is SUDAS? SUDAS is Statewide Urban Design and Specifications. It's a statewide standard for a common urban public works improvement that's set up in Iowa. It started in the Des Moines Metro. In 1995, it was developed to maximize the benefits of the road use tax funds expenditures, and it was kind of pushed by the governor to get this out and have a statewide standard. And then many of the sections have actually combined with the DOT with SUDAS. So benefits of SUDAS. It's uniform, so across the state. Reduction of contractor confusion and mistakes due to different specifications. Because our local contractors are used to the blue books, but maybe the contractors from Des Moines or whatever are afraid to bid on our projects because it's different specifications and there might be small print that they're not used to. By going to the SUDAS specification, we're actually going to have better bid prices, we're going to have more competition, so that'll drive our numbers down. There's also more research. As you can see, the books are very much bigger than the Metro standards, so there's just a lot more information, different techniques and materials that SUDAS has done research on that Cedar Rapids just doesn't have the time to do. There's a forum that allows state and local governments to collaborate instead of Cedar Rapids just making the changes and not letting us know. And even though we have not adopted SUDAS, they're already implementing some of our recommendations that we gave them. This allocates better staff time because we're not having to go through and, there's been stuff that we found out. We're having a pre-construction meeting with a contractor and are we following this new specification that Cedar Rapids wrote? Well, we don't even know what that spec is. So, us having to spend time and research and what did they change, what did they not change, will save us time because SUDAS actually sends us updates and says this is what we changed. We go to meetings and it's much more transparent. And there's a mechanism to be proactive in research and studies for new and improved urban design and specifications. So, like I said, they're already taking some of our recommendations and implementing them into SUDAS. So who uses SUDAS? So there's cities, counties, the Iowa DOT, consultants, contractors, material suppliers. There's 14 technical committees that are different things like sanitary, sewer, water main, paving. There's 6 district committees, so we're in District 6, so we have 3 meetings that we go to. And then there's also a board of directors, which is 38 members that meet twice a year. So who's on the board of SUDAS? There's 9 MPOs and TMAs. There's 6 district committee chairs, 6 APWA or American Public Works Association, 6 county engineers, 2 consulting engineers, 6 Iowa DOT staff members, and there's 3 cities with populations above 100,000. And then there's also advisory committees. There's contractors that are involved in this, so it's not just engineers setting the rules. The contractors get a say as well. Every one of these little spots here is someone that has these books. So you can see not only is it pretty spread out over the state, but there's even manuals outside of the state that people are using. Some of those are population centers that are near other Iowa sections, but you can see it's spread out. This is a lot of communities that are using these manuals. So there's 1,200 standard specifications and 600 design manuals in circulation today. Every city with a population of 15,000 or more has the manuals. SUDAS actually doesn't have a count on who's actually using the manuals because it's completely voluntary to be part of it. So, for example, Cedar Rapids comes to the District 6 meeting, but they're not a member of it yet. Consultants, contractors, and material suppliers all use the manuals and strongly support the program. So the design manual, that's one of the books there, and that basically is the book on how to design a street or infrastructure project. And so you can see it has stormwater requirements, sanitary, water main, roadway, geotechnical, on and on. Some of these things, we actually have city codes that would oversee these, like the street tree criteria. So the Parks Department has their own ordinance for that, and so the local ordinance actually supersedes the SUDAS manual. Then there's the actual specifications manual, which also has several divisions, and this is where they've actually taken some of our input and they're going to implement it in the release that they do here in November, December. A lot of the specs, like we said earlier, are common between DOT and SUDAS, and that way it helps with, there's less confusion. If you can bid a DOT project, then you're using a lot of the same specifications instead of having a different set of specifications for DOT, Cedar Rapids Metro, and SUDAS. There's 50 common figures, 83 pages of information that is combined with DOT and SUDAS. So again, because they're working together and trying to make a cohesive set of standards, we're not changing a lot between specifications. So the updating process, so anybody can raise a concern or make a suggestion on a material that should be used. It then goes to the technical community for review and comment. And then each district votes on it, whether they like that or not. There's been discussions about complete streets and street widths and all that stuff, and so it goes through all the different districts. They give their recommendation, and the board of directors actually votes on the recommendation. They come out with the changes in November, December each year, and actually give us printed copies of that to put in the book. So adoption schedule, we actually had a public open house last week, October 28th. We had a whopping 4 people that showed up, 2 of which were from the city of Cedar Rapids. We had 1 contractor and 1 consultant that uses SUDAS regularly. So today we're doing the quick presentation of SUDAS to you guys. And then on Thursday, you guys will set a public hearing for the 19th where we'll have the first reading. So because we're adopting specifications, we have to do it by ordinance, so it'll be 3 readings unless you guys waive the 3rd reading. So it'd be November 19th would be the first reading, December 3rd is the 2nd reading, and December 17th is the 3rd reading. And the purpose of that is so that the projects that we release this year will follow the SUDAS standards instead of the Metro specs. So next year we're following the new set of specifications when we go into the winter. So any questions?
I'd like to mention too that this has been kind of Mike's baby here, so he's been doing this over the last year probably. He's read through these books from beginning to end, and what we've done as a group, the engineering staff went through and discussed the differences between this book and the blue books, and within that we have written special provisions which will reduce the impact to the local contractors on those things that are significantly different between the 2 documents. As we work through the process through the next few years, we'll probably get rid of those special provisions and have everybody move over to the full SUDAS book. But we wanted to make it comfortable to some of those individuals so that they wouldn't have to immediately change everything. I want to say one of the significant changes within this is because of the ongoing street diets, you might say, and the complete streets and everything. SUDAS does require a 26-foot wide residential street instead of a 28-foot wide. So we feel that's a good change. It allows for parking on one side. It does provide some things that I think planning would like to see as well. I'm sure the developers would like it, so we are recommending that change be used within the new subdivision. So,
we're not going to hear about the good things.
No, probably not. Surprisingly, a lot of the contractors, even locally, are using a lot of the portions of the SUDAS. We've adopted, actually, the legal section and Chapter 12 already, so we're using parts of it, and we have been writing reverse special provisions, you might say, that we're using pieces of SUDAS in our current plans because they just make a lot more sense than what we were using within the Cedar Rapids Metro stuff. So we think it'll be a smooth transition. We're hoping that everybody will benefit extremely as we move over to it.
What's the practical effect of the narrower street?
Well, it has to do with slowing traffic. It creates more of a residential feel. It'll only be for residential local streets, so.
Cost.
Cost to
Yeah,
upkeep,
definitely cost, but it has to do with traffic calming, having to do with parking, and since we're only doing parking on one side now anyhow within all our new subdivisions, it makes sense to, if you only do parking on one side with a 28-foot street, you end up with quite a bit of width there, and the traffic can still move pretty fast within that residential area. If you go to 26, it calms it even more and allows for safer situation for children and so forth in those residential areas.
Because it doesn't cause any issues.
It doesn't, it will with some people, because if you're going down through there and you meet a car, one of you has to move over or slow down, but that's what it's meant to do. Some people will not like that. But that's what's happening in a lot of the streets now, so.
Okay.
But I mean, some of our streets are 27 now, some of them are 28, so I mean, 2-foot difference, but that's less that Ryan has to clear with snow. And
Why do you think that only 4 people showed up?
I think a lot of people already use SUDA, so it's not really a
They're
controversial.
familiar with it and they're okay with it?
Yeah, and we're not, by that notification, we weren't really notifying any of the general public. It was, we were trying to notify those users of,
No, I
of the
understand,
book,
but
yeah.
I would have expected
Yeah,
more
it went
people
out
to
to all contractors, developers, engineers in the area that-
directly contacted them.
through email, yeah. And then it actually went out through, Cedar Rapids sends out, it was the developer board, I think is what they call it.
Yeah,
They sent out, I mean, it went out to hundreds of people.
it went out to the local, what's the developers board?
Will they know about the public hearing too?
Developers Council.
The developers,
That gets published in the paper.
and we,
They won't get a direct notice about the public hearing.
Other than when I sent it out,
In case
I
they
actually,
couldn't come to the meeting.
the email that I sent out actually had the schedule, and it had the public hearing
Okay.
on that schedule that I sent out.
and well, it's been out in my newsletter, and it's been on the website for a couple weeks, so.
Is there any one item in there that I'm gonna get a call on a Monday morning saying you're trying to break me from a developer or a builder? I mean, is there any, what's the top 5 bad items? We know a good one.
Yeah. I mean, there's some rules in there, such as a bidder has to have 50% of the contract in order to bid on the project. So say it's Rachi Construction and they have a project like 10th Street. So on 10th Street, really the main portion of that project that they did was removing the old street. They didn't pour the base. They did put in the little bit of drain tile that was put in there. They didn't put the brick in. They didn't put the HMA. So they did a relatively small portion of the project. So that's, in SUDAS, it actually specifies that they have to do 50% of the contract unless we specify otherwise. In our special provisions, we actually wrote in there that they don't have to have 50% of the contract to help the locals out, so that they can still, if it becomes a problem, then we can move to SUDAS in that. But there's things like that in there. There's all vehicles and equipment have to have the company name on the side. We said, we don't really care if your name's on the side of it. We know who's out there working, but there's some different requirements in there. So
Most of the items are pretty insignificant, I would say. I think we specified, we like the, I'll call them plastic for no other term, our cleanouts, our subdrain cleanouts are currently concrete, and I prefer they're polyvinyl. We prefer those as an installer and aesthetically looking. They're a little bit more expensive than maybe a concrete one would be, but it's pretty insignificant, and that's pretty much similar to everything else we're looking at.
Nothing on stormwater that's earth shattering?
No.
I think the only thing with stormwater is right now it might be an inch storm, and it may be an inch and a quarter.
What is the thinking of the contractor doing more than fit? I only ask that because they all have subs. I noticed Culver's, I think, is laying the bricks.
Yep.
If they don't do that, they couldn't have bid the job then?
Right. I mean, certain projects, I don't know that you would find one contractor that has half the contract. But the idea is you don't want somebody to come in and do 10% of the work and manage the project if they don't know how to manage the project. So that way, by them doing a bigger chunk of the project, you're not dealing with as many subs. But some projects are just, they're so dynamic that you have to have a lot of subs. If it's a simple, like Hillview, where it's just a street and some storm sewer, there it's easier for the pipe contractor to get that 50%, but that paving is still a big chunk of it. And so if you make it so that it has to be 50% of the contract, then sometimes it might be only the paving contractor that could be the prime. And so that makes it hard. You know, if they don't want to manage the project, they want Rachi or Rick Lifts or somebody else to manage the project. They just want to come in and pave, and they don't want to deal with all that extra paperwork. You know, they might not have the manpower that others do.
At one time, I don't know, maybe Don can answer this, there used to be a brokering law in Iowa that the main contractor, the prime contractor, had to have 50% of the contract, otherwise it was considered brokering. I don't know if that still exists or not, but because of the way we work with a lot of local contractors over and over again, we have pretty good control of not dealing with an absentee prime. I mean, we seem to have a pretty good deal with that and don't feel that that's an issue.
And that's understandable, but if you have, if they have a sub, well, again, like the brick streets, if you have a sub who is knowledgeable in that area, and it only makes sense that they would use a subcontractor who's more knowledgeable in laying bricks than they are, you know.
Does any of this affect like the building inspection and guidelines or anything that will touch on?
No, the building department is still have the international building code that they follow, so I mean they follow that standard.
But nothing that this is going to do will touch what they're inspecting, or
This is everything in the right of way, and they're everything outside of the right of way.
Yeah, the only thing that's remotely close to building is like when we abandon a building or tear a building down, and like the sanitary service and the water service. We actually took the specifications that we currently have and put them into the book. So.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, but you've looked at that and make sure it's nothing. And then also for the, does it address the bidding? I think currently we're thinking that a private contractor bidding on a public job can do that without getting bids. Is that addressed in this, or?
I'm not sure I understand your question. We go through every required time we have to go through the bidding threshold laws require us to have public bid. We do. This does not address anything beyond what the state laws requires.
Okay, so it doesn't change any of what we're currently doing.
No.
Okay, and then the final thing was you have contractors that are on the boards for the various zones.
Yeah, I don't know that there's any on the official board, but they're on the recommendation committees.
But are they on the specific areas? You said we were, what, District 6?
Yep.
Is there District 6 people on that?
Yeah, so it was Dave Schmidt. He had one of his foremen was at the last meeting that we had at SUDAS District 6. So it was valuable to get their input too. I mean, we see it from the engineering side, but that way we can say, you know, is this a burden that we're putting on you by making this regulation? So that way we get their input as well.
Okay.
Yep.
So there was local input on
Yep.
this then. Okay, well, thanks.
And local that we found out about instead of finding out after the fact.
Joe, I've sat on the committee on the board of directors actually for almost 15 years, and it's a very dynamic, very interesting. They do a lot of research. They do a lot of outreach. There's a lot of consultant and contractor input. It's just not a bunch of engineers. We used to have a full-blown committee that would look at if I had a new product that was cutting edge, they could bring that to that committee, and we'd go through it and review it and do some testing and some research on it, and then decide whether it went into the manual or not. It's been a pretty comprehensive process over the last 15, 20 years.
Like most churches don't have.
Whenever you hire a trainee, you give them the book and say, here, read this.
Kind of.
Is that what they did to you, Mike?
No. I can tell you, I started off in the private sector working for doing projects in several municipalities down in the Johnson County area. And Iowa City, Coralville, North Liberty all had different specifications. So if you're going to do a subdivision here, you'd pull out those specs and read through them, and everybody's a little different. Even with this, I mean, things like fire hydrants. We want our own fire hydrants, that way the fire apparatuses can hook up to them. That way the water department has the same equipment, and they don't have to have, what type of fire hydrant is it, so we can get the right equipment. That way they can stay with the same equipment. So every municipality is a little different in certain aspects. Mm-hmm. But it helps to have one standard specification instead of, all right, we got 20 communities, which set of specifications are we using? And got to remember, okay, they want this and they want this. And
so install a new hydrant that has right-hand threads instead of left-hand. You can't hook up to them. That would be bad.
Thanks, Mike.
Yep.
You guys would find a way, though, wouldn't you?
The only item under planning is related to a purchase of a home within the Central Corridor Development Area, and this is on the corner of 5th and 15th Street. So it's just down the street. It's a little white house. It's got a for sale sign in the front yard right now. The city noticed the project or the property come up for sale, approached the owners that were selling it. We actually got in the middle of a transaction. We need this piece for the expansion of 15th Street going into the corridor. It's a small home on a small lot, but nonetheless, it went up for sale, so we had to intervene during the transaction. We didn't know it was under a contract for sale, but we approached the owners. That sale fell through, so we had the opportunity to place an offer on the home, and it was very key that we did it quickly. I talked with Lon about it, and then I called the mayor and Mayor Pro Tem last week to at least get the property kind of tied up with a purchase agreement. Per the city's policy, the city manager and the mayor or Mayor Pro Tem can enter into a purchase agreement with full approval of the council coming at a later date. The home was listed at $85,900. That was the price that we offered. As you know, we're required to do an appraisal on the project. Generally, we like to do an appraisal before we make an offer. That way we have fair market value based on the property. We didn't have that opportunity because it was actively being listed. We had to act quickly, so that's why we made the full price offer. That being said, if the appraisal comes in and it is higher, we would be obligated to pay that higher price, and that's written into the offer, and that's standard language when you're talking about purchasing property for right-of-way consistent with Chapter 6B of the Iowa Code. So that we're still obligated to do. But nonetheless, we're in a position where this is a property we need. The buyers are actively, or the sellers are actively trying to sell the property. We've made an offer, and at this point, the staff's requesting the council proceed with approving offer for the property. Do you have any questions on the specifics of it?
That's what happens when they can't get a hold of you.
What's that?
I can't picture the
Let's see.
location.
Here, let me. You drive down 5th.
It's running there.
You go north on 15th, to the White House.
Well, there's in fact, there's 3 railroad houses there.
Yeah, that's
the one on the corner?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's just south of the vet clinic.
I'm sorry?
Just south of the vet clinic
Right.
it's on the corner of, I know this isn't a very wide shot of the area, but 5th Avenue, 15th Street, so there's 4-way stop right here. I believe 15th Street's isn't it about 30?
Not very wide.
30 feet wide, I think, the right-of-way. It's very narrow, so as a major arterial in the future going up to the 6th Avenue corridor, servicing Marion Independent High School, we're going to need a wider street with sidewalks to accommodate the traffic in the future. So actually, the right-of-way that we'll need will come right down the middle of this house. So,
But that's where you're planning to put a roundabout, right?
the roundabout would go north.
Up on eight.
Yeah. Regardless of whether it's a roundabout or a 4-way stop, that street needs to be widened.
We stop considering it's the route to 4 schools.
What this, you're doing this to widen 15th, basically?
Yep.
Sir, okay, thanks.
Yeah, Tom approached me on a rainy Friday afternoon and said, hey, we need to get this going, so I approved it. For the change we had with the Mayor Pro Tem could allow them to do the initial offer.
Yeah, I do appreciate that. I mean, this policy is so key for us to move on these properties. I was in Sioux City at a conference when I received the call from the agent saying, hey, we've got so I thought we had lost the property and we would have to wait for closing. And then we'd have to approach a new owner of the property and say, hey, I know you just bought this house, but we need to buy it for right away. And how horrible would that have been for a new buyer to have to be a part of? So unfortunately, we did get in the middle of it, but we were able to work directly with the existing sellers, and I think they're going to benefit, from the relocation assistance and things that we've done elsewhere. But it was quite the situation that we got in the middle of. So
You know, of course, that was the house in which a former police chief lived.
I did not know
I
that.
bet you didn't know that, did
I
you?
didn't.
Tom, are there any other homes in the area that you'll need to buy, or?
There's a number of properties. There's no more on Fifth Avenue that we would need. The vet clinic to the north is one that we need to acquire. We've actually acquired the property, 2 homes north and east of this on 15th and 6th Ave in the past. So
One of them's that brick house there.
the brick house that's still standing is one that we purchased many years ago.
Yes.
So.
Got quite a few items under administration up for discussion. The first one is a memorandum of agreement with Matthews Holdings. This is the one where they will allow us to install the infrastructure that we need in the basement of their building to support the water needs for the Art in the Alley project. Them allowing us to do that means that we don't have to put in a separate meter pit or anything in the outside, and saves quite a bit of expense on the project. Number 2 is a temporary construction easement with First Presbyterian Church. This is an easement from the church that would allow the employee cars for whoever the selected contractor is for the Art in the Alley project to park in their parking lot during the day. So rather than taking up parking up in front of the businesses or anything like that, the employees from the crews that will be working on the project will be parking further down the street. Number 3 is a temporary construction easement with Coben and Hervey LLC. This is Franz Community Investors. This is the parking lot that was part of the Sorg Pharmacy building when they acquired that property. They're going to allow us to use part of that parking lot for construction staging. So the contractors will have the opportunity to put their construction materials, construction equipment, anything that they need in that location. Again, keeping the parking keeping it off of the street. Number 4 and 5 are related to number 6. Of course, this is related to the designation of parking on 11th Street and on 8th Avenue and 10th Street to replace parking that's going to be lost with the Iowa Realty building that was tabled at the last City Council meeting. The City, of course, has been working on this project for quite a while and had been negotiating with the property owners since last year to acquire all the property and the rights to use the property that we needed in order to complete the construction project. The Council at the last council meeting directed staff to go back and take another look at the area to see if there were any other solutions that we could come up with. Amanda and Mike from engineering worked extensively on the project to see if there were some other things that could be done to make some improvements to what was going to happen there. And I guess I would just ask that they have the opportunity really to talk about what we're taking a look at with number 6. I'll ask Mike to do that. Yep.
This exhibit is in your council packet, but we'll just kind of zoom in and talk about a few areas. So basically what we did is we looked at all the existing street parking that's in that area and where can we add additional parking. Currently on just south of the First Presbyterian Church, there's yellow curb out there where there's parking stalls that are not being utilized that could be utilized. So there was 5 spaces that we found in that area. We almost got 6 in there, but unfortunately there's a fire hydrant and Deb doesn't like it when we park in front of that. Then right in front of the hair salon, not sure why it's, what we did is we actually measured the spaces Typically, a parking space is 9 foot wide for vehicles that are high turnover. They can go down to as tight as 8.5 for low turnover, but some of these are actually 10 foot or wider. And so by restriping this, we're actually able to get one more parking spot in front of the hair salon. We weren't able to fit any more on this portion of 11th, but because we're closing the alley to vehicular traffic, we're able to get another 4 spaces in on the west side. And again, there's 1 space in here that we could not get because, again, there's a fire hydrant there. But we got another 4 there. So there's 5 net spaces on 11th. There's 5 over here. And then if we go over here on 10th, basically when you have a parallel parking spot, 20 foot is the minimum so that you can get your vehicle in there. And because we're closing the alley to vehicular traffic other than the dumpster pickup, we're able to get 1 more spot on the south portion of the alley and 1 more on the north side. So there's several additional parking spaces that we're able to find. I know it's been brought up that there could probably be additional parking on 7th Avenue right here. We can't put it on the north side because there's a bus stop there, but there's no bus stop on the south, so we could probably get another additional 2 in there. We also, a lot of the employees of the businesses up there actually park down here on the south portion of 11th Street and then walk up. And with that, we were able to get additional 1 parking spot on the east side and 2 on the west side.
So 17 more spots? I've been adding them up. I think it is 17. Wow.
Park 8 hours a day there?
Well, how many extra spots did you say you came up with?
I counted 17.
17?
Mm-hmm. I've been 5 and 2. That's 12.
Did you look at Granger House at all for those 12 spots? You said that those people would be parking for 8 hours a day. They would walk a block.
Yeah, just during the conversations, a lot of the actual owners of these businesses actually park down here and then they just walk across 7th Avenue, and that way they leave the parking spots there.
I'm talking about the realtor spots. You had 12 spots for the realtors. Did you look at Granger for that? Did you talk to them about that? Granger's open during the day, and those spots were supposedly during my brief. They said that they would be parked there 8 to 5.
How many spots are there?
How many do they have?
So anyway, you did not look at Granger.
I did not look at Granger, no.
Okay.
Mike, if you're adding 15 more spots, why do you need to have reserve parking? I guess I don't see that. I don't want to start a precedent
And it's a
of making.
dangerous one.
What?
It's a dangerous one.
Well, it is. I guess with adding 15 more spots, I don't see that we need to have the reserve parking.
It was also brought to my attention that in April we entered into agreement apparently with the Iowa Realty that we would utilize those 12 spots for our Art in the Alley project. Okay, at that time, did we, in that agreement, which I'm not aware of, but did we stipulate that we would provide those 12 spots that they're losing on these streets and give them specific parking spots?
In the contract, we said that we would come up with a mutually agreeable.
Mutually agree. Okay, fine. Well,
But if you don't know what is mutually agreeable.
well, I'd like to say you have it. I'd just like to throw one more mix in there, and we have the Granger House up there, which has a parking lot that's not used during the day. Which, if they're just going to park there all day, they could park there and then walk back and forth. That's fairly close, and that doesn't hinder the short-term parking for increased retail parking spots for these people utilizing 7th Avenues, 10th and or 11th.
I think it's commendable that we found more parking.
Yeah.
The tip of the iceberg here is for one building. When we start work on 7th Avenue and don't have parking over there, and people are going to want to park back there to use those rear entrances, we're going to struggle. And to think that we found 15 more parking places is really valuable. I have voiced displeasure in reserving for one business. I think we should, reserve for parking for business, period. I think the 8th Avenue opens up an area where you could still have parking, reserve parking over there within a very short walking distance instead of reserving on 11th. Those few businesses on 11th struggle enough for parking. But I just, I think of the future, if we set a precedent, now what we're going to have, because believe me, I can remember, Slug and Kay would remember when we had boardwalks going to the doors of those stores when we tore the sidewalks out last time. And we have to allow them to stay in business, and parking is going to become a real item. So let's go cautiously with what we're thinking about doing.
I think everybody has good comments and, valid concerns and considerations. And just one thing that hasn't been mentioned that I think you need to also think about as you decide. These property owners, this is a very, very important. These property owners are giving up their right to their property in favor of the public. Okay, that's a big thing. They're saying, we're no longer going to really have use of this property. Even though we own it, and it's our property, we're going to give it for public use. And we're going to allow an easement on there for public use. So that's just one one of the considerations that needs to be also thought about, that they're giving up something here. Okay, so just keep that in mind. That's all.
Yeah, you're right.
I guess one thing I would also like to talk about is really kind of the timing or the sequence of events when this would happen. With the Art in the Alley projects getting ready to be put out to bid, it's not going to start construction until next year. And the signage of the spots would not happen until the construction project actually gets underway. Now, in the interim, between now and then, I'm expecting over the next 4 to 6 weeks that are going to hear back from the folks proposing to do the mixed-use project and parkade project, so that we have an idea of what their construction schedule would be, so then we know when that parking would come online. The agreement that we have in place with the owner of the buildings stipulates that as soon as the parking ramp comes online, that these spots that are reserved on the street automatically move to the parking ramp. So before we ever get to the point where we sign these, we will know what that time schedule is. The other thing that I would suggest is that if the council votes to move forward with designating the spots, we can actually monitor it very closely over the next couple of months to see what the actual utilization is. Because one of the fears that I have is, looking at the nature, for example, of what Shermco may do on that corner. They have a lot of employees that may come in the morning and then they're gone and in other cities by 8:30 or 9 o'clock. If that's the nature of what they're using and those spots are open then throughout the day, that would give us some ammunition to go back and talk to them and say, look, maybe what we need to do is sign this as private parking from 6 a.m. until 10, rather than having it restricted all throughout the course of the entire day. So we'll have some opportunities to do that, but we need some more time to really study that and see what the dynamics of them using those spots are. What I don't want to have happen is kind of what you might have seen with some of the reserve spots with what Linmar has been going through, with students that come and then leave during the day with assigned spots, and then people can't come in and use those spots, so the parking lot is sitting there underutilized. Parking is definitely a precious asset in the uptown. We're trying to find something here that is very agreeable, that's a good solution during the interim. At worst, Shermco has a lease through the end of 2017, so you're looking at potentially 20 months where the parking might be reserved. I would echo Paul's comments that, I mean, whenever you start doing a construction project in the uptown, I understand the discussion about a precedent, but uptowns everywhere across the state have issues with parking. And when you've got construction projects going on, sometimes you have to make changes that may be a little bit painful in the short term or may not make everybody happy in the short term, but are better for the entire community in the long term. And if the council can't figure out a way to solve what, in my view, out of 325 spots is 11 of them, is a relatively small problem, then we might as well say we are never going to do anything with 7th Avenue, because the council will never be able to get through the decisions that you'll have to make when we tear 7th Avenue up and impact the parking on 7th Avenue and 11th Street going in both directions. We'll be affecting a lot more businesses and a lot more spots when we start talking about doing that project. So you have to be able to take a look at the long-term view for what's the best thing for the community, with the understanding that there may be some individual businesses that get affected negatively during that period of time. You know, when you come through and do a Main Street reconstruction project, it's not unusual to lose 30% of your businesses. But the only way to do it is to come through and do it right. That's why cities a lot of times do Band-Aids and do overlays rather than doing reconstructions, even though it costs more in the long term to keep doing overlay after overlay after overlay after overlay rather than coming in once and doing the project right. It's not an easy decision. It's a painful decision, but, you know, it's part of the council's responsibility to have to make those calls.
So what you're suggesting is that this be tabled further?
No, I would like to see the council approve it, subject to further appraisal by staff to see how Shermco is actually utilizing the spots during the day, so that by next April or May, when they would actually go to the point where we would have to designate the spots, that we have some ammunition to go back to them and say, hey, look, you know, this is when you're actually using the spots. Let's scale back that agreement so that we can make the parking spaces more available during the day for other businesses.
But the problem arises when, okay, let's say the library thing goes through and they've got 55 apartments and they need 87 parking places. You've already set a precedent of putting reserved parking on the streets, so I'm against approving this at this time.
It's not really setting a precedent for reserving spaces on a street, because the library project, whatever they would bring back, would be required by the subdivision ordinance and building code to make accommodations for, or excuse me, the zoning ordinance to make accommodations for the parking demand that it's going to create. In other words, they'll have to come back with a plan that if they're going to create additional demand for parking, they're going to have to figure out a way to accommodate that on that site and not necessarily on the public parking. I try to put myself in the standpoint of, you know, if I own a building in the uptown and I have a parking lot, that parking lot has value and it's precious to me for being able to lease that building out. If the city were to come to me and say, we would like you to put your parking, allow us to use your parking spot for a public improvement, and you're never going to have access to it again because you're going to grant us a permanent easement, what would I want in return? I would want the same number of parking spaces that I was giving up. So it's not an unreasonable request. If it were permanent, I would share your opinion. But because it's something that is going to be temporary until the parking structure is built, I look at it a little bit differently.
The parking structure is so nebulous as far as the timing is concerned. Like I said, I'm totally against taking street parking and making it reserved. End of my comments.
Any other comments on this? Mayor had to go pick up his sister at the airport, so.
Joe, I think it's important that we talk about the fact that one of the follow-up actions of this is to get this project out and get it let. If we don't do that soon, which requires this benefit or some variation of this benefit, this project really can't move forward. At some point in time, we lose the grant, we lose the whole project. We've gone back through and done a lot of work on this to re-engineer it, to revalue it, to get it to fit into the budget. I think it's important that we keep that in mind, that this decision is probably the linchpin to this project, or some similar decision to it. I mean, we have to somehow come to an agreement with Shermco to allow us to use their parking lot. And I think when you talk about precedent, I know you're all stuck on that, but this precedent is not a precedent. There's not very many people, and I think Lon said it too, and so did Nick, was that they're offering us something. How often is that going to happen? Somebody's going to offer us private property so they can have reserved parking on the street. I don't think that's ever going to happen again. So the word precedent really doesn't apply.
And I guess one thing that I would point out is to just further Dan's comments a little bit. The city is responsible for the infrastructure in these areas where they are heavily publicly used. We were going to have to spend city money to improve these areas to make it pedestrian friendly and more usable for these businesses to use their rear entrances during the 7th Avenue reconstruction project regardless. The amount of money that we're putting in hasn't changed from what that would have been if we were doing it on our own. The difference is that we've gone out and leveraged $500,000 of additional private investment via the Art Place grant and $150,000 worth of private and foundation donations to improve the project to a state well beyond what we were ever going to be able to achieve on our own. And this, as Dan said, is really kind of a linchpin for being able to move forward with that project. Delaying it for another month could add $50,000 to the project when we've already cut a lot of the things out to fit it within the existing budget. And I don't know that we want to compromise the project to that level. We've had 3 other businesses that are giving up parking in this area as well, and none of them have asked for any of that back. And it's because they're supportive of the project. They understand what it will mean to their buildings and to future tenants and the uptown area in general. It's not as if this is an investment that doesn't return something back to the community for making improvements to this area. The council has had in their strategic plan for years wanting to improve the uptown so that we can start preparing these businesses for the inevitable reconstruction of 7th Avenue, and this is really the first phase of that. We've just figured out a way to take what we were going to do and we were going to pay local city dollars for anyway and turn it into a much better project than it would have been otherwise. A big part of that has been the willingness of the property owners to tell us, you can have 3,000 square feet of our property. They're losing some value on that because they're not going to be able to ever build on it. They can't expand their building. They can't benefit from that or sell it or lease those spaces when they go to lease the building on again. So they're giving up something as part of this project as well. They're just asking for us to, in the interim, use some of that street parking to help as compensation for that until the ramp project is built.
You imagine giving up your driveway or your front yard to the public and saying, I'm not going to be able to use that anymore. And, they really are giving up something here. The staff has gotten creative and been able to find additional parking spots. I drive by there all the time. Those spots are not used. I mean, there's so much parking around there. The only time that there's an actual issue with parking is in the evenings and on weekends when there's events down here. There's a lot of parking, in my opinion, all around there.
And that's good thinking, but how would I feel if they were to be working on the alleyway behind Zoe's, and Zoe gave up his 3 parking places, and the city said, well, you can go down here at the end of 10th, and we'll reserve these 3 spots for you that happen to be in front of my office.
I can understand that concern, Paul, but I don't think it's a direct comparison because we're reserving spots that are in front of Shermco, not in front of another business. They're not across the street. They are in front of the offices and adjacent to the offices that company is using. If we were to take them and if we had proposed to put them in front of the Maid-Rite or Treasure Chest or any of those other buildings, I would wholeheartedly agree with you, but I don't think that's the case here.
I have no problem putting them on 8th Avenue. There's no business on 8th Avenue, and you're gaining 8 or 9 parking places. And that's a short walk over there. The 2 in front of their building, yeah, but the rest of them on 8th makes sense to me. But I just turned me the wrong way when I think of a reserved parking place in front of someone else's business. That's disturbing to me.
Well, what disturbs me is making them narrower because you put a couple SUVs in there and forget it.
Yeah, but a couple of them, Mike said, were like 12 foot. Did you say one of them was?
10 foot.
Yeah, there's several that are much wider than they need to be.
I think it's terrific. We found more parking downtown. I think that's terrific.
Finding those spots in front of the church,
Nick would want me to say uptown back there.
And I would point out that, without number 6, where the motion directs staff to reconfigure that east side of 10th Street and to do that striping on 8th, we didn't really have those spots that we could go in and offer as an alternative to Shermco. So if the council authorizes us to do that, we can see if that would be acceptable to the business. And I still think even if we do that, it's definitely worth the investment of staff time to monitor the actual usage of those spots and then go back and see if it really would be required that they be reserved the entire day long, because I would suspect that what we'll find out is that most of the time when they need them is going to be in the morning.
Yeah, we heard from the one argument that the apartment folks are using them. Is that factual? Do we know that? Or?
I have no idea.
If they're going to have apartments up there.
Anything else for Mike then? What's that?
They got to park someplace. The apartments.
Yeah.
Because they're losing their place behind the buildings.
Yeah.
No.
Anything for Mike?
You what?
Anything else for Mike?
No.
Okay. Yes, number 7.
Number 7 would be the project calendar for the Art in the Alley project, which would basically start the process of putting that out to bid. Number 10 is a resolution to approve the second-year program design with Vivera for the city's well-being program. When Vivera was selected, it was a 3-year agreement with the ability to go in and customize the plan design every year. It was anticipated that that would change some from year to year as the needs of our employees change and as the company makes recommendations for how to keep the momentum of the project going. There have been some changes from the first year to the second year. The primary one is that the benefits for the employees would be reconfigured to foster more spousal participation. The first year we had over 83% employee participation, but we didn't achieve that level with the spouses, so we're looking at changing the incentives to provide more of an incentive if you get the spouses to participate. And then the process would move forward. We basically have a calendar with them that, because the well-being program is done on a calendar year schedule, we need to get it in place so that they can get it propagated out through the website. One of the things that I think may have gotten lost with some of the prior discussions about the well-being program is that this is a program that has been designed with significant employee input. We've gone out and done surveys, we've done focus groups, and we have done additional research through our well-being committee that represents all the city departments to have the employees tell us what would motivate them to participate, what types of things would they be interested in for the types of incentives and program design. So the second year, it gets harder to earn your incentives because the point total that you have to achieve is higher, so you're asking more of the employees, and then we've asked them what would continue to motivate you to be able to participate. So when we started getting into some of the details about the specific incentives, I don't think we really explained that to the council, that this was what the employees were telling us would work. And that's why I think, we've well exceeded the first year experience that most organizations see with employee participation. 50 to 55% is considered to be a rock star performance in your first year, and we went past 80. Most organizations are happy to hit 75 in the third year, and I think that is a testament to the fact that what we put together was something that interested the employees. The other information that I wanted to share is some people have questioned, why would you even do a well-being policy? So we had Vivera do a little research, and they found some information on a case study of a very similar community to Marion, 31,000 people, a little bit smaller than us, but they've been more active in doing a well-being program for a number of years. And what their return has been is that for every dollar that they've put into their well-being program, they've achieved a $3.27 decrease in employee medical costs, which in the case of Marion, we're self-funded. Medical costs go directly to the bottom line on property taxes. Every dollar that we save is a property tax dollar that we don't have to take in. In addition to that, they've had a $2.73 decrease in absentee costs. In other words, the cost of work that doesn't get done because employees are out because they're ill and somebody else has to pick up that work on their behalf. So between those two, they've saved $6 for every dollar that they've put into their well-being program. That's why we're doing it, is to have that impact in future years and on an ongoing basis on our overall medical costs. Again, medical costs for us, because the employee benefit levy is directly tied to the costs of providing medical insurance and paying for health benefits, it's a direct tie to property taxes. That's why you do it. You've got to do something to make sure that you're keeping those costs under control. I've heard arguments that, the employees should be doing that individually. There's examples all throughout the organization of employees that are doing that, but we're going through a process grounded in research, based in science for why we should do this. And to be quite frank, most of the reasons that I've heard for why we shouldn't be doing it come down to either my employer doesn't do it or we just shouldn't be doing that. We've got to remember that we have that distinction between being a community but also being an employer, and this is something that makes our conditions as an employer better. Again, translating into better service and reduced costs for the taxpayer.
And I know right after you announced the Fitbits, I sent you that article on Target, and I didn't realize they had that many employees. 150,000?
Oh, it's 335,000.
Yeah, and so...
And it's just interesting because there are several local private employers who have made that decision to go that route, and they just didn't get any press for it. But because we're a public employer, we got some press about the issue. I think a lot of people somehow view them as a nicety. They're a serious health monitoring and fitness tool. I mean, they're not toys. They're not something that's just a fun thing for people to have and people to use. They're a serious tool for us to help manage and improve our employee health and well-being.
Any questions on that?
Mm-mm.
Number 11.
Number 11 is a request from Prospect Meadows. Prospect Meadows continues to work on their financing for their project. They have submitted a grant application to the state for the Community Attractions and Tourism Vision Iowa program for what would be the last piece of the financing that they need in order to be able to proceed with their project. One of the things that they've run into as a nonprofit that doesn't yet have a track record is arranging the financing during the construction period and then moving into the actual permanent financing for the facility. At this point, they've filed a request with the city to consider what they would call an annual appropriations guarantee, meaning that in any particular year, at least during that construction period, if, for example, a pledge didn't come in or something happened that caused some dollars not to come in, that the city would guarantee that that payment would get made. It's part of the security that they would offer for the bank. Now, in practical purposes, what that really means is you're not guaranteeing the entire pledge, because that's about $750,000 a year. The portion that you're actually guaranteeing, or you could be on the hook for, would be whatever didn't materialize in that year. So if someone made a pledge of $50,000, the company goes bankrupt, they can't fulfill that pledge, that would be the increment that you would end up having to fulfill. In our case, that would end up actually being an advance on Marion's future pledges. So it wouldn't be an increase to our overall commitment to the project. It would just be a timing issue. It does have some potential downsides in that you've got the potential there for some kind of an unbudgeted expense to come through. It's just a request at this point, so we haven't done any kind of a full financial analysis. Hasn't been run past our bond counsel or anything like that, but it was something that they wanted us to take a look at. Ultimately, once they're up and running and they have a little bit of a track record, I would expect them to go into the Iowa Finance Authority, looking at some of the bonds that are available for nonprofits through that organization for permanent long-term financing, and then the guarantee would no longer be required. They'll come in later this month to make a formal presentation on it and a formal request at the next series of council meetings, but for now, it's just a receive and file.
Would that go on our financial? It's a 15-year deal. Is it $10 million debt? How would we? That's
why they think they specified the annual appropriations language. When you do an annual appropriation, the only portion of it that shows as a debt is whatever is in that given fiscal year. So $750,000, not the entire amount of the agreement. It is year by year. The city council has to appropriate those dollars. If the city council chooses not to appropriate those dollars, there is no guarantee. It's a riskier proposition for the bank, but it's very similar to what happens when you do a TIF rebate agreement. There's an annual appropriation clause in there, again, to make sure that you're only counting that year by year portion as an actual debt, because that's all the city council can do. Iowa law doesn't actually allow you to do multi-year budgeting, so you can't approve a budget for 5 years out.
They are nonprofit, but they do pay property tax, is that right?
That would be a determination that the county would have to make. I would suspect that because a great portion of their revenue would come from rentals to Perfect Game, a for-profit corporation, that they would be required to pay property taxes. That's kind of the litmus test, is how much of the income that you're receiving is derived from activities on behalf of a for-profit corporation.
Wouldn't it be a really good idea if they'd pay those taxes to the city of Marion?
They fully expect to be annexed.
Thank you.
Any other questions on that? So you're saying that the maximum we would ever have to give them is the commitment we made of the 1.2?
Yeah, what you really would be doing is you'd be drawing against a future pledge to fulfill it in that particular year if for some reason they didn't. Someone didn't fulfill a pledge in a given year. They have an allowance out there, as most nonprofits do, for doubtful pledges or things like that may materialize, but that's the maximum amount of risk that you have. And again, it's only the difference between what actually comes in and what the bank would require. So if it's $50,000, that's what you would be, but it's never going to be $750,000 because our pledge would be something that would be coming in at $100,000 to $150,000 a year. And then you've got Lynn County, you've got the Hall Perrine Foundation. I mean, there's a lot of organizations on that list that are just simply not going to renege on a pledge.
Do you foresee that it would cause us a bonding situation for the city to cover this?
I don't think so. We've got the ability as part of future bonds to do what is characterized as a de minimis portion of the bond. A small amount, a small percentage that could fulfill our pledges to the project, but up to $500,000 of it is going to come out of the future local option sales tax as well.
Okay. Anything else?
I'm not making a recommendation on it one way or another at this point. It needs more research. Just wanted the council to have more of an explanation before we get to the next set of council meetings.
So we should hear from Jack
Yeah, they'll
Christmas,
be here.
Probably.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I appreciate that you gave us this explanation, that we know what's coming. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Number 13 and number 14 are a release of a mortgage for a promissory note that was executed along with the development of Hunter's Ridge. This was done back in '98, and it was related to the extension of the sanitary sewer out through that area. And they're looking at selling a couple of lots that have been developed along Winslow Road, and in order to have clear title for those lots, the mortgage needs to be released. Don has reviewed it and didn't have any concerns about it. It probably actually should have been released 7 or 8 years ago, because I think it was a 10-year note when it was originally done. It just was never done.
Is the note paid off?
I believe so, yeah.
It is? It's all paid off?
Yep.
So why is it a partial release then?
Because it's only for these two lots. They wanted to get these two released so that they could proceed with a closing, and then they would come back to us with a request to do the rest of it and the balance of the property. It's a timeliness issue.
Okay, because it seems like, to me, that if the note's been paid off, you'd release the entire mortgage.
Yeah, they were just looking at wanting to get these 2 lots closed out quickly and wanted to get these released.
So there won't be any proceeds from that sale going to pay off the note, because there's
No.
no note anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Who owns the lift station?
They'd be privately held. The city doesn't own any lift stations.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
That it?
That's it.
Yes, ma'am.
This Peppermint Walk on December 4th, I see that there's a request to waive the fees for police officers and hanging banners and various things. Who's going to pay that overtime? Because those people shouldn't be doing this, I don't think, voluntarily. I mean, this is part of their job, so.
If you look in the hotel motel, I believe in the hotel motel budget, we have an allowance in there to compensate emergency services to support community events.
This is okay, but they're gonna be covered so that they're not doing it for nothing.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Anything else?
You get to gavel too.
I get the gavel. We're done.